To me, Charlie is the strangest character in Hazbin Hotel, and before you immediately click off this video, please hear me out first and let me know your thoughts after you're done with this video, whether you agree with me or not. Because here is the thing, and this is something I think a lot of us within the fandom, myself included, tend to forget because of how she is portrayed. But Charlie Morningstar is the second most powerful person in hell. Second, because at the moment we have no idea where Lilith is. Because I too don't think she's the one stuck in heaven like the angels believe her to be. But Charlie Morningstar, daughter of Lucifer Morningstar and Lilith, princess of hell, is the second most powerful person in hell. And yet, the way in which the narrative presents her and how she carries herself makes a ton of us forget that. A part of me is fascinated by it, actually. How Charlie's big eyes and heart on her sleeve persona mixed with her bubbly nature and naivete means that we tend to subconsciously infantilize her in our perception and how we talk about her and the agency that she does have, but which the fandom tends to take away from her. Looking at all of you that seem to think that Alistair tricked her into making a deal with him. Because I don't know who needs to hear this, but Charlie Morningstar is not a child. She might act like it, and her voice does have that high pitch that we as humans have been conditioned to automatically associate with children or people who are way younger than we are. But Charlie Morningstar is not a child. She's a full-grown adult. Matter of fact, she's technically the oldest person in the Hazbin Hotel. Yes, even older than Alistair and Serpentius, because while she might be biologically in her 20s, her actual age has her at 10 times that amount. And last I checked, the one whose age comes closest to her in the hotel, now that we've gotten confirmation of what time he lived as a mortal, is Serpentius, who died in the 19th century. And I think this is important for us to keep in mind as we think and talk about the character of Charlie, because I don't know about you, but I do find society's continuous attempts to infantilize women as a form of misogyny, which means that trying to baby Charlie and her decisions and actions within the story for me falls under misogynistic tropes, which is a great place for me to bring up her bit with Angel Dust. And before I go into that, because I know that some people watching are probably Charlie fans, I am not attempting to shit on your faith. Matter of fact, I do think that a lot of Charlie's traits within the show were purposefully written that way in order to contribute to her growth as a character, so that by the time we close the curtains on Hazbin Hotel, we as the audience are meant to see just how much she's grown and evolved as a character. And I am ready for that, which also means that aunties, I am not in your camp. Now, to enjoy her character growth, it is important for us to be aware of where her character currently is, and we can appreciate the effort that she puts into becoming the woman we would close the curtains on by the time we eventually wrap up the story. And Angel's Dust relationship with Charlie is one that brings this to mind very strongly. Because ever since I watched Hazbin Hotel Season 1 Episode 4 titled Masquerade, it's been increasingly clear to me just how lacking in emotional intelligence that Charlie Morningstar is. Which is interesting to me because it is worked into our characterization of her being a good person who wants to do good, but who quite often has a way of making the situation so much worse. Emotional intelligence, remember, because in Masquerade, Charlie basically throws a tantrum. And I know I just said the word tantrum and your mind immediately went to a screaming toddler or an adult who cannot regulate when things are not going their way and so explodes as a result of that. And you're weighing that against the happenings of the episode and thinking, but Noria, that didn't happen. Well, that is because Charlie Morningstar's tantrum looks a bit different. Because you see, the event of Masquerade that see Angel Dust unburdening himself to Husk and we, the audience by extension, kicks off because Charlie is insistent on Angel remaining at the hotel for their show and tell exercise, because it is meant to be a chance for them to unburden themselves in an act of group therapy. And Angel has to be at work instead since Valentino called him in for an emergency shoot. Considering the fact that he does work for Valentino, who unfortunately has his contract, Angel leaves the hotel and heads to the shoot. And this is where Charlie's tantrum comes in, because she considers Angel's presence at the show and tell more important than the work he has to do and the overload that has him in chains. because his presence is important for the moment of vulnerability and the unburdening of his soul that is meant to serve the core function for which the hotel exists, to redeem the souls of sinners. I think it's important to note that because whenever I see people talking about the episode and the scene, it's always about painting Valentino and Charlie on opposite sides of the spectrum, when I think that they are both in the episode more focused on what they want out of Angel rather than what Angel actually wants for himself. And whilst Valentino's tantrums involve him manhandling Angel's chains, especially when he believes that Charlie's presence at the shoot is because Angel wants her to save him, Charlie's tantrum, meanwhile, is about asserting her position as the princess of hell to demand Angel's return to the hotel so that they can pick things up from where they left it. She has absolutely no regards in that moment for the palpable fear that we can read on Angel Dust, who tries and fails to get Charlie to leave because at that moment she's on a crusade and wants to exercise her power, when in actual fact her actions are instead further endangering the person she's there to save. But then again, remember, she's less there for Angel as he is, but is more there for Angel as he's meant to be at her hotel, working on his redemption, which is her sole focus. And because she's solely focused on that, she ignores Angel's pleas, which gives Valentino enough time to notice her, proposition her for a film, before he realizes why she's there. And that is what makes things so much worse, to the point where Angel is assaulted and has to chase Charlie off, who then spends the rest of the time crying until Angel, who is feeling bad about the whole situation, finally accepts her apology. Which, I don't know about you, but it is a scene that rubs me the wrong way every time I see it, because here is the victim having to comfort the unwitting savior whose actions and words put him in further danger. I am firmly of the opinion that if your actions cause someone else harm and your response is to be all teary-eyed as you apologize, so the victim then finds themselves comforting you as they accept your apology, that shit is manipulative as hell, even if you didn't mean it that way. Masquerade as an episode, like I said earlier, helps us as the audience to properly view Charlie, if we take a moment back and really look at the events, as someone who doesn't really notice the cues being set forward. She's instead laser focused on what she wants, and while she's trying to do good, it doesn't mean that her actions do not cause pain or hurt in the process. And instead of taking note of this, of realizing just how invasive our actions actually are and can be, and the clear issue she has with boundaries and respecting those same boundaries of the sinners turned friends that she's trying to save, it flies all over her head. Because her apology to Angel Dust in the episode doesn't really explain or delve into the actual core issue that led to the happenings of the episode, which is that Charlie as a character has an issue with respecting other people's boundaries that is wrapped up in her goodness and a desire to help. Just because she wants to help doesn't mean that her actions are always permissible or acceptable. And because she doesn't actually get that lesson, we see her repeat the exact same mistakes in season 2 episode 3, where not only does she accept Vox into the Hazbin Hotel, a safe space for Angel Dust, who rightfully calls her out on it because he doesn't want to be that close to any of the V's, she brushes off his concerns and instead makes everything so much worse by signing him up for a redemption episode where she tries and fails to recreate the circumstances that led to Serpentius's redemption, and when that doesn't work, demands that Angel, her friend, mind you, unburden is sin to her with zero understanding or consideration for what she's actually asking of him in such a public space where Vox and Velvet are recording. It isn't until Vox blots out that Angel killed his father that she finally snaps at him for going after her friends, and I just had the most uncharitable thought in that moment whilst I was watching the scene of, so you understand how big a problem it is for Vox to hound your friend and tear open his wounds and secrets, and yet you were just doing the same moments prior for the sake of your redemption story. And you don't notice that, do you? There's such a disconnect with the character of Charlie that, like I said, it fascinates me because she really is a good representation of good intentions still causing harm in its wake. And yet, the fandom, specifically some Charlie fans, because of that bit of infantilization that they have going with her, make excuses and keep overlooking this clear moment of Charlie Morningstar causing so much pain and harm to the sinners in her care. And I am partly baffled and also intrigued by that because rather than call her out for those actions, there's this need instead to try and wipe it all away under the guise of, well, it's Charlie, she's just doing her best, she doesn't know any better. And I'm over here like, her 200-year-old ass definitely should. That is the point of her character. Her growth and trajectory in this story is to have Charlie Morningstar, who at the end is more aware and conscious of her power and her actions. Even the bit in Masquerade where she storms the recording studio after Vaji tells her that she doesn't really lean into her power as the Princess of Hell is one that I tend to sit with a lot, because whilst we can read her trying to intimidate Valentino as a girl boss moment, I instead saw it as a child trying to imitate an adult in their lives in order to get something that they want and not quite pulling it off because, one, they are still a child, and two, it is borrowed power that isn't quite like the real thing. And before you say, but Noria, you started this video by stating that Charlie is the second most powerful person in hell, aren't you contradicting yourself? I will like to state that she is the second most powerful person in hell, but she doesn't move like she is. And attempting to cower Valentino into submission when she hasn't taken the time to grow into her power and be recognized as that tour de force meant that what she ended up doing was cause more harm than good. Also, part of having power in hell is recognizing how hell works and the rules that bind its citizenry, yourself included. And so, failing to recognize the authenticity of a contract and what it entails was not the power move she thought it would be, which further lends credence to the fact that it read more like she was play acting at power rather than fully embodying hers, which is yet another instance of me reading her as infantile, even though she probably was not meant to be read that way in that scene. And of course, there's her relationship with Vaji, where we know she loves and adores her girlfriend, and yet every single chance that Vaji tries to offer her advice that is contrary to what Charlie wants to do, she ignores it like a child who has to learn from their mistakes the hard way. We see this happen yet again in season 2, episodes 3 and 4, where Vaji tries cautioning her about reaching out to Vostek, who they are aware is currently running a smear campaign on her. And yet Charlie, with that naivety and childish optimism, doesn't listen to her girlfriend and gets burned as a result of it. Once again, causing harm to Angel Dust, who is in her care, as she is the proprietor of the hotel he currently resides in, where he is meant to find safety and family. I find it very interesting that we don't talk enough about her recklessness as a fandom, especially because, and I'm sorry that I'm using this word yet again, but it reads pretty infantile to me. Charlie should know better. She's been in hell long enough, longer than the hotel residents, and yet the sheltered upbringing that she's had whilst in hell and her power as the princess of hell has meant that she's not had to face too many direct repercussions that have caused harm to herself personally, which means that her self-preservation and survival button is quite broken. But my hope and expectation is that at the end of the show, we would see her finally grow up more than she can and has in her over 200 years of living so far. Now that she has others around her and her actions are directly affecting them in ways that she cannot experience herself based off of her position and privilege. Maybe those are the moments that would force her to grow and evolve and question and learn. And all I can do and hope is that Angel is spared for more of her attempts to save him that just leave him more devastated and broken at the end. Because, like I've said before, wanting to do good does not mean that you might not accidentally cause harm in the process. But of course, these are just my thoughts. I would, as always, love to hear yours. Do you agree with me? Disagree with me? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like this video if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet. Share this if you want. Support me on Patreon if you can. If you can't, however, do consider checking out my other channels. One of them is my gaming channel, and the other holds my ASMR content. I have both linked in the description bar if they sound like something you might potentially possibly be interested in. Whichever the case may be, however, I will see you tomorrow with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.